This, the second of the 3 Agile and Lean talks, is going to look briefly at one particular popular Agile development technique called Scrum. It will be a very brief overview, so we're not going to spend much looking at it. The reason we look at Scrum, other than to give you an example of an actual Agile development methodology, is that we're going to draw upon a few of the features that it has when we're tackling the project within this particular module. But it's very much introductory Scrum, if you like. In fact, there's a third-year module that looks at sort of Scrum and Agile development in a lot more detail. But here, we just want to dip our toe in the water and to try out some of its characteristics. As I suppose the picture here maybe suggests, Scrum actually gets its name from rugby. Where in rugby, a scrum happens wherever the game sort of stops, some infraction or something, and then the rugby ball gets put in and the game carries on from that point. So that sort of notion of breaking, of capturing, of restarting, it does a nice job of getting what Agile approaches are all about. Scrum is one of the more popular Agile approaches. And how it works is that it chops up time into a number of different iterations, as do indeed all Agile approaches, and they're called sprints in this particular case. So a Scrum project comprises a number of different sprints, and inside each sprint you're doing a bit of work. Generally a sprint, it's typically 2-3 weeks, can be 1, can be up to 4, generally doesn't go much beyond that particular bound. The image here, we'll look at on the next number of slides different aspects of this, but it gives you a snapshot of all of the key things that are related to or occur within the actual Scrum process. So starting over on the left hand side, we've got a product owner, and we've got the development team. And up towards the middle of the top, we've got the Scrum Master, and these, if you like, are the key individuals involved within it. Things like the product backlog and the sprint backlog are going to be, if you like, the bulk of the documentation. That's what's we're going to capture everything we need to do. The sprint then, the 1 to 4 week sprint, is where the work gets to be done. There's a few sort of characteristics occur within this in terms of our daily stand-up meeting, burn-down charts. And at the end of it, over on the right-hand side, other than producing finished work, you'll see sort of some of the lean characteristics coming in here. We're interested in reviewing and doing a retrospective on what went well, what didn't go well, and how do we need to change or adapt within the next sprint. So it's got all of the important characteristics of an Agile and a lean approach in terms of its different elements. So let's now have a look at these different elements. So in terms of the people, or the key individuals that we have involved within the Scrum process, one of them is the product owner. Now, this is the person who knows what needs to be developed. Notionally, they have the vision of whatever the development is about. And if there are any questions about, well, would you prefer this, would you prefer that, or how should this work, or what's important to do over here, then it's the product owner that would be asked those questions and would be able to provide the answer to them. So if you like, certainly that's if you like, it's the client, is the person who owns the project that has a key role in helping direct the creative vision of it. Alongside that, we have the actual Scrum team, or the development team. They're the ones that deliver on the vision, the goal of the product owner. And at the end of each sprint, the target is to have it's known as a PSI, a potentially shippable increment. So it's an increment, it takes things forward, it's potentially shippable, which means that it's not sort of just done in half works, it is polished, it's the type of thing you actually could send out to a client and say, there you go, it's the finished article. Normally the Scrum team, several different people within it. The usual bounds in terms of a very small and very large team would apply. In terms of Scrum, most of the team individuals are fulfill multiple roles. So it's known as a cross-functional team. So one team member may do a little bit of development, do some analysis, do some testing, and it's sort of mixed up between people. There is a bit of variation. Sometimes teams may have people with specific roles within it in terms of maybe a testing expert or an architectural expert. Finally, but certainly not least, we have the Scrum Master. Impressive sounding name. Their job really is to enforce the rules of Scrum. So Scrum has a set of rules and if you like, requirements about how the team, the product owner, how they ought to interact and behave. And the Scrum Master's job is basically to make sure that people follow the rules of the game. Importantly, and probably the most useful role of the Scrum Master, they're there to help the team along, to stop the team from being distracted. So they make sure that other people don't try to pull the team off in ways or to put into place new changes that actually could end up distracting the team. Now, the Scrum Master, they're not the manager of the team. So strictly speaking, they facilitate, they make things happen, they make things work. They're there to help the team. They're not there to manage it. The team manages themselves. So it's fairly nice configuration. In terms of what gets to be done, the totality of what needs to be done is stored within what's known as the product backlog. It's nothing more than a list of requirements. It's a prioritized list of requirements, so you have, or you can pull out from this what are the most important requirements that you want to do. And you can put anything in it. It can be a business feature, a piece of functionality, it could be some technical challenge or a bug fix or whatever. But it is a big list. And if you like, this holds the full vision from things which are central to it to things which are sort of desirable. Well, if time permits, we'll put that in. But it's the snapshot of everything that's to go into the project. It's each of the requirements that we have within the backlog, or the product backlog, they're not big long documents. It is a concise statement of functionality, and it's really just to act as a sort of a memo or a starting point that can lead into more in-depth analysis. So very often they're stored on, can be sticky notes or index cards. They can be put up on a wall. You can have an electronic version of them as well, but it's, as you see in the post-it here, as who, I want what, so that why. And we'll look in the next slide a little bit more detail about how the user stories are written. So each of the user stories, it is a concise statement. It's not a long waffly one. It's as small as it possibly can be. It's written, generally speaking, from the perspective of the customer or the person who's using the product. So it's not from the developer's perspective, it's from the user's perspective. A short, clear statement of who, what, and why. So for example, as a user, I want to be able to save my file in Excel format, so that I can import it into Excel and use it to calculate whatever. So you identify a role, you identify a goal or what is desirable, and you provide the benefit, the business benefit from that. And it is only intended to be a little small snapshot. The image you can see over on the right gives you, with some of them, the sensible ways that it should be clear and unambiguous, correct and consistent, cohesive, complete, observable, attainable, things like that. So they're all desirables by way of doing it, but something that captures in a short form a useful thing for the user and gives the reason why it's useful to the user. That's really what a user story is about. Now, we've mentioned that within Scrum, we split up our development time into a number of sprints, 1 to 4 weeks in duration. And for each sprint, before it starts, it's preceded by a sprint planning meeting. And this is the thing that will go through the product backlog, the big list of requirements, and then take from this or select which user stories are going to be implemented within that particular sprint over the next, for example, 2 weeks. and it gives you your sprint backlog. Now, the product owner is the key individual within this, but they do it in collaboration with the team. So the product owner will look at the backlog and say, okay, there's maybe 100 things I could do. At this point in time, what is the most important thing for me to have done in the next 2-3 weeks? And they'll talk to the team in terms of getting their input as well. But the product owner, they pick out one or more user stories. So they take a user story, the most important one out. The development team then looks at this and does a little bit of analysis in terms of saying, okay, well, I think it'll take us maybe half a week to implement and to test that particular feature. And they're then sort of deciding how much time and effort it takes. Now, there may be 2 weeks available within the sprint. If doing, say, the most important user story takes half a week, they then go back to the product owner and say, okay, well, tell us something else, give us another thing. And that process repeats until you've got a sprint's worth of activity. So you think within this sprint, we can do these 3 different user stories. So you're just planning a couple of weeks ahead. It is possible, and there's a lot of devil in the detail here, that maybe the product owner is going to pick something as most important, and whenever the development team looks at it, they go, well, actually, there's a load of work involved in doing this. This is not an easy thing to do. That's actually known as an epic, and you can actually break that down then into whatever smaller user stories would be involved and put those into the product backlog and then select the ones you want from that. So there's a whole lot of devil in detail here, but in essence, it's sensible. Get the product owner to pick what's most important for them at this point in time, get the development team to say how long it's going to take, and repeat that until you've got a couple of weeks or 3 weeks worth of development effort planned out. Once we've got our sprint backlog and the sprint planning meeting is done, then we're ready to start the sprint proper, to take the 1 to 4 weeks from that. And remember, at the end, we're aiming to have a potentially shippable increment, something that works, that's run, that's been well tested, that we could give to the users and say, it's done and dusted. So a few things about how the sprints run. Generally, when a sprint starts, the sprint backlog doesn't change, or 9 times out of 10, it will not change. So you can't have the product owner coming in saying, actually, can I add this one in? No. Or I don't want that one, I want to replace it. No. So you're only planning for a couple of weeks out, and the general rules of the game are that once you've established activity for that next couple of weeks, that's what you work on. And that stops distractions coming in and upsetting the team. They know what they need to focus in. Now, of course, if there are exceptional circumstances, so some bug comes in that must be fixed, it is mission critical, then you can throw things out of the sprint and put that in by way of dealing with that particular issue. I suppose it is worthwhile pointing out here that it is the team, the Scrum team, they are the ones who are managing the process. They're the ones who are deciding each day what it is they're going to do. So it is not a top-down managed process where you have a project manager who's checking on people, okay, are you doing this? You should be doing that now. That's not the job of the Scrum Master. Scrum Master is there basically to help enforce the rules and make sure nobody distracts them. But it is the team themselves that get to manage the process. Much more, adds a lot more responsibility to the team members. But generally it's a lot more rewarding, but it does assume you have people who can effectively self-manage. Now, there are things that can help this. There are processes or things known as a burn down chart, and this is one way of tracking time over the sprint to see roughly, are you on schedule or are you out of schedule? Do you need to change or to put anything else in? And there's a daily stand-up meeting each day, normally no more than 5 minutes. It is a stand-up, it's not a sit-down and discuss. It is really where every member of the team has a chance to sort of say, okay, here's where they're at, here's what they're planning to do. And it's really just by way of informing the team, or if there's anything blocking them, here's what's blocking them, what needs to be resolved. So, key takeaways. That's really all we want to look at in terms of sprints. I suppose, or Scrum in general, I suppose I should say that at the end of the sprint, whenever they have submitted everything, there is a retrospective. They look back in terms of, well, how did it go? What can we learn from it? But for key takeaways for us in terms of Scrum, it is one of the more popular Agile approaches, and it gives a devolved form of project management that is up to the team working in conjunction with the product owner to sort of, to help determine what is selected, how much development time is needed, and then for them to structure their time so that they do deliver on those objectives within that particular sprint. And generally the emphasis is that if the team promises or agrees to deliver 3 user stories within the sprint, that's what they will try to do. And I suppose the more experience you have, the easier it is to actually manage that. That's all we want to look at. Within the module, we're going to be splitting up the development time into a number of different sprints. And it's going to afford you with an opportunity to plan what you want to tackle within. We're going to use 3-week sprints within every 3-week period. And also then to give you the opportunity to try to manage your time within that sprint by way of delivery. And I'm going to be asking you to commit to delivery of your sprint objectives. So it's not just an optional target, it's something that you actually are going to work actively towards achieving. In the last talk, we'll bring all of this together in terms of how Agile and Lean, how we're going to integrate it within the module, and the aspects that particularly I'm interested in you taking away and utilising.